My name is Sloan. I am 34 years old, and I work as a director of contracts and risk management for a high-end corporate event firm. I never in a million years thought I would be sitting down to spill my family's darkest, ugliest secrets on the internet. But after the absolute disaster that was my younger sister's wedding, I genuinely need to get this off my chest. You always hear about bridezillas and toxic in-laws, but nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your own flesh and blood views you as nothing more than a disposable walking ATM. I was standing in the dimly lit, drafty corridor of a breathtakingly expensive estate. It was the kind of venue that featured rolling emerald hills, historic stone architecture, and a price tag that could buy a decent house in the suburbs. The main ballroom was a vision of sparkling crystal chandeliers, lush floral centerpieces dripping with white orchids, and softly draped silk linens. It was the epitome of elegance. But I was not standing in the ballroom. I was standing next to a heavy, swinging metal door that led directly to the catering kitchen, right across from the high-traffic hallway designated for the public restrooms. The air in my section did not smell like expensive roses or roasted tenderloin. It smelled distinctly of industrial lemon floor bleach, stale beer, and the sharp tang of garbage bins waiting to be taken out. It was loud. Every time the kitchen door swung open, I was hit by the sounds of shouting chefs, clattering plates, and the heavy thud of footsteps. And right there, wedged into this chaotic, noisy, miserable corner, was a wobbly wooden bar stool. Next to it was a tiny high-top cocktail table, the kind you lean against at a cheap dive bar, barely large enough to hold a single appetizer plate. Resting exactly in the center of that pitiful table was an elegant place card written in beautiful, sweeping gold calligraphy. It read, Sloan. +1. I stared at that card, feeling my stomach drop into a cold, hard knot. My ears started ringing. I am her older sister. I am the one who spent hours negotiating the contracts. I am the one who helped secure this very venue. I am the one who skipped meals and lost sleep to make sure her dream day went off without a hitch. And this was my reward. A broken stool by the toilets. Before I could even fully process the sheer scale of the humiliation, my sister Fallon glided through the corridor. She was 31 years old, radiant in a custom white silk gown that hugged her figure perfectly, looking every bit the pristine, flawless bride she had obsessed over being for the last 2 solid years. She caught me looking at the stool. She did not look apologetic. She did not look embarrassed. She did not even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, she offered me this sickeningly sweet, pitying smile that made my blood run cold. Oh good, you found your spot, Fallon said, casually adjusting a sparkling diamond bracelet on her wrist. You can just sit here for now. Lachlan said this area is just for +1s anyway. We had to prioritize the main floor for VIPs and established couples. It is a space issue, you know? Not my fault you showed up single, right? The casual cruelty in her voice felt like a physical slap across the face. Just for +1s. I looked past her shoulder, through the open archway into the grand dining area. I saw massive tables filled with casual acquaintances, distant relatives who had not spoken to our family in a decade, and random coworkers Lachlan had met maybe twice at a water cooler. Everyone had a plush, velvet-cushioned chair. Everyone had a spot at a massive, beautifully decorated table with multiple forks and custom wine glasses. And then my eyes landed on table 4, right near the front, practically touching the bridal party area. Sitting there, laughing loudly and sipping a glass of premium champagne, was Declan. Declan was my ex-boyfriend. He was the man who had completely betrayed my trust and shattered my heart 3 years ago because I was, in his exact words, too focused on my boring corporate career to be a fun girlfriend. He was seated at a prime table, surrounded by my family, treating the open bar like his personal fountain. The sheer, unadulterated disrespect hit me so hard I could barely breathe. My chest tightened until it physically ached. My vision blurred for a fraction of a second as a wave of pure rage washed over me. For my entire adult life, I had been the family ATM, the designated problem solver, the one who worked late nights and weekends so I could bail them out of every single financial and emotional mess they created. I had funded holidays, paid off ridiculous debts, and silently swallowed every backhanded insult just to keep the peace. I thought I was being the bigger person. I thought I was protecting them. But standing there, listening to the bathroom door creak open and shut behind me while guests flushed the toilets, something fundamental shifted inside my brain. Something snapped. This was the absolute breaking point. You might be wondering how an older sister ends up seated by the toilets at a wedding she practically bankrolled. How does a highly educated, successful risk manager allow herself to be treated like human garbage by her own flesh and blood? Well, let me take you back. Let me show you exactly how 20 years of being the invisible, unloved daughter leads to a $5,000 revenge. Let me show you the anatomy of a toxic family. Because the story of that wobbly barstool really began a long time ago, in a house where my accomplishments were always treated as threats and Fallon's mistakes were always treated as tragedies. Growing up, the dynamic in my household was painfully clear to anyone paying attention. Fallon was the golden child. She was charismatic, loud, expressive, and effortlessly drew everyone's attention the moment she walked into a room. I was the quiet one. I liked numbers, I liked rules, and I liked logic. When I brought home straight A grades on my report card, my mother Veda would give a brief, dismissive nod and say, "Well, that is what we expect from you, Sloane. You have no social life, so you better be smart." When Fallon brought home a barely passing grade in basic math, it was a cause for a massive family dinner celebration and endless praise about how hard she tried. I learned very early on that my sole role was to be the sturdy, reliable background scenery for Fallon's starring role in life. But it went so much deeper than just emotional neglect. It was active, calculated exploitation. Let me open the doors to my personal museum of quiet pain, so you can truly understand the twisted foundation this entire wedding was built upon. Exhibit A happened when I was 19 years old. I was in college, and I had worked agonizing double shifts at a greasy local diner for an entire sweltering summer just to buy a used, reliable sedan. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I bought it with my own blood, sweat, and tears. One Friday night, while I was dead asleep after a 14-hour shift, Fallon, who was only 16 at the time and did not even possess a full driver's license, snuck into my room and stole my car keys. She wanted to go to a senior party across town to impress a boy. She ended up backing my precious car straight into a concrete parking pillar, severely denting the entire rear quarter panel, shattering the taillight, and cracking the bumper in half. When the local police brought her home in tears, I was absolutely devastated. I demanded she use her allowance to pay for the repairs. My mother Veda stepped in immediately, physically standing between us and shielding Fallon as if I were a monster attacking her. "Sloane, look at her. She is practically shaking," my mother cried, wrapping a thick blanket around Fallon's shoulders and kissing her forehead. "Your car is already broken, but your sister is deeply traumatized by this accident. Stop being so incredibly selfish. We will figure it out." We never figured it out. My parents never gave me a dime. I had to drain my own meager college savings to fix the car just so I could continue getting to work. Fallon never even looked me in the eye to apologize. Exhibit B takes us to my mid-20s. I was 26, fighting tooth and nail in a highly competitive corporate environment, trying to climb the ladder in the risk management sector. Fallon had just graduated with a completely useless degree and decided she wanted to work in high-end public relations, despite having zero internship experience. For 3 straight nights, I stayed awake until dawn, completely rewriting her terrible resume, coaching her on advanced interview tactics, and quietly leveraging my own hard-earned professional network to get her an entry-level position at a very decent firm. She got the job. The very next day, she posted a massive, glowing update on her social media platforms talking about how entirely self-made she was. She wrote a whole, long paragraph about how grinding hard, manifesting success, and relying on absolutely no one but herself brought her this amazing career opportunity. When I commented a simple, supportive heart emoji on the post, she deleted it within 5 minutes. Later that week, I found out she had completely blocked me from seeing any of her professional updates. When I asked her why, she snapped that my presence on her page ruined her aesthetic of being a fierce, independent self-starter, and that my boring corporate job was killing her vibe. Then there is Exhibit C. Just 2 years ago, when I was 32, Fallon called me in the middle of a major board meeting, sobbing uncontrollably. She begged me to let her borrow my emergency credit card. She claimed her car had completely broken down on the highway, and she needed 4 brand new tires immediately just to commute to work so she would not be fired. I stepped out of the meeting and gave her the card number over the phone, trusting her tearful promise to pay me back the second she got her next paycheck. Exactly 1 week later, I saw highly edited photos of her and Lachlan sipping cocktails at a luxury resort in Miami. In every single photo, she was prominently holding a brand new, limited edition designer handbag. I looked up the price. The bag cost exactly the same amount she had charged to my emergency credit card. When I confronted her about the blatant lie, she just rolled her eyes and sighed loudly. Relax, Sloane. You make so much money anyway. Why are you hoarding it like a dragon? You do not even have a husband or kids to spend it on. I need to look good for Lachlan. My mother Veda called me an hour later and told me to just let it go, arguing that Lachlan's family was wealthy and Fallon needed to keep up appearances to secure a marriage proposal. I ended up paying off the massive debt myself, working 3 extra weekends to cover her vanity, just to stop my mother from crying on the phone. This was my daily reality. This was my life. I was the safety net they deeply resented. Every time I succeeded, they found a way to minimize it. Every time Fallon failed, they found a way to make it my personal and financial responsibility. I stupidly convinced myself that if I just kept providing, if I just kept fixing things, eventually they would wake up and see my value. I thought my utility would eventually earn me their love and respect. I was deeply, profoundly wrong. You cannot buy respect from people who view you as an appliance. 3 months before the wedding, the grand illusion of Fallon's perfect, wealthy life hit a massive, unavoidable roadblock. She and Lachlan had champagne tastes on a tap water budget. Lachlan worked in tech sales, driving a leased luxury sports car and wearing flashy, expensive watches, but his actual income was entirely commission-based and incredibly unstable. They had maxed out their budget booking Alaric's estate, an exclusive, heavily sought-after venue that required all vendors to meet extremely strict insurance and financial criteria. Fallon had her heart completely set on using a specific, legendary catering company owned by a fierce businesswoman named Corliss. Corliss was an absolute culinary genius, and her prestigious company handled the most elite corporate galas and charity balls in the state. They were also incredibly expensive. Because of the high demand, Corliss required a massive 50% non-refundable deposit up front, plus a rock-solid corporate guarantor if the remaining balance was not paid in full 30 days prior to the event. Fallon and Lachlan simply did not have the cash. They were completely broke. They had exhausted their credit limits on the venue deposit, the designer dress, and a ridiculous custom floral arch. One Tuesday evening, my mother Veda called me, weeping hysterically into the phone. Sloane, your sister is having a complete nervous breakdown. The caterer is threatening to drop them from the schedule. The wedding will be ruined. Everyone will laugh at us. You have to help her, you're her sister. I drove over to my parents' house, feeling a familiar sense of dread creeping up my spine. Fallon was sitting on the living room sofa, clutching a tissue and looking perfectly miserable, while Lachlan paced the hardwood floor looking angry rather than worried. These caterers are being completely unreasonable, Lachlan snapped, aggressively loosening his tie. I told them I have a massive commission check coming next quarter. They just need to wait. It is bad business on their part. Corporate caterers do not work on verbal promises and future commissions, Lachlan, I said, rubbing my temples to ward off an incoming headache. Corliss is a very serious businesswoman. She runs a tight ship. Well, you know her. Fallon cried out, suddenly lunging forward and grabbing my hand with a desperate grip. Sloane, your company uses Corliss for all those huge tech summits. She likes you. She respects you. If you just talk to her, she will waive the deposit. Or Or you could just sign the guarantor form. Just put your company down as the financial backup. We will pay it, I swear on my life. It is just a stupid formality, so we do not lose the date. I should have said no. I should have walked right out the front door. Every single professional instinct in my risk-assessing brain screamed at me to walk away from this burning building. But my mother was crying loudly, Fallon was pleading with her big doe eyes, and Lachlan was staring at me with a heavy expectation that made my skin crawl. So, against my better judgment, I made a fatal error. I agreed to help them. The next morning, I arranged a private meeting with Corliss at her downtown office. Because of the millions of dollars in corporate business my firm funneled to her catering company annually, Corliss agreed to bend her strict rules just this once. She accepted a much smaller initial deposit from Fallon, but only on one very specific condition. I had to personally sign a legally binding corporate guarantor agreement. If Fallon and Lachlan defaulted on the payment for any reason, my company, and by extension, me personally, would be immediately on the hook for the entire catering bill, which amounted to tens of thousands of dollars. I am doing this as a personal favor to you, Sloane, and only you. Corliss had warned me across her massive oak desk, her sharp, intelligent eyes locking onto mine. But I have to be honest, your sister seems very flaky. Make sure she pays the balance on time. I do not want to have to activate the extreme penalty clauses in this contract. I assured Corliss it would be absolutely fine. I truly, deeply believed they would find a way to pay it. To smooth things over even further, and because I heard endless whispers from my mother that Fallon was severely stressed about paying for the premium open bar, I went to the bank and withdrew $5,000 from my own personal savings account. I put the crisp, new $100 bills into a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was meant to be my wedding gift, a silent, secret injection of cash to ensure they did not start their marriage in total financial ruin. I gave them the world. I literally staked my hard-earned professional reputation on their superficial wedding. I handed them a literal safety net made of solid gold. And what did they give me in return? A broken barstool by the bathroom. I thought my endless generosity would finally buy me a permanent place in their hearts. I did not realize they had already decided long ago that I was nothing more than a stepping stone for them to walk all over. The actual day of the wedding arrived, bright, sunny, and mockingly perfect. Because I was the designated family fixer, I showed up at the estate 4 entire hours early. I did not get to sip fancy fruit mimosas in the luxurious bridal suite while getting my hair and makeup professionally styled. Instead, I was down in the main reception hall, wearing sensible flat shoes and a messy bun, helping the frantic florists untangle hundreds of feet of fairy light strings and directing Corliss's stressed catering staff on exactly where to place the outdoor heat lamps. I sweated right through my silk blouse before I even had a chance to change into my formal evening dress. When the massive setup was finally complete, the venue looked truly magnificent. It was a picture-perfect Pinterest dream. I slipped into the designated vendor bathroom because the bridal suite was locked to me to quickly change into my gown and touch up my melting makeup. By the time I finally emerged, the classical string quartet was playing a beautiful melody, and the hundreds of guests were beginning to file into the cocktail area. I walked over to the beautifully designed, massive seating chart displayed on a vintage antique mirror near the entrance. I scanned the VIP tables at the very top. Table 1, parents of the bride and groom. Table 2, the massive bridal party. Table 3, Lachlan's extended family. I kept scanning down the glass. I checked table 4, table 5, table 6. My name was absolutely nowhere to be found. A cold panic fluttered in my chest. Did they completely forget to print my name? Was there a mistake? I frantically searched the room and found Tamsin, the young, visibly overwhelmed wedding assistant Fallon had hired at the last minute to save money. "Excuse me, Tamsin," I said gently, not wanting to add to her stress. "I think there is a printing typo on the mirror chart. I cannot find my seat anywhere. I am Sloane, the bride's sister." Tamsin looked down at her heavy clipboard, her finger tracing the long list of names. She suddenly stopped, her face flushing a bright, painful red. She looked up at me, then down at the clipboard again, looking incredibly uncomfortable and terrified. Miss Sloane. Yes. You are not on the main floor chart. You are listed under the overflow section. Overflow. I repeated, the bizarre word tasting like dry ash in my mouth. What overflow section? Yes, ma'am. Please, just follow me, she whispered, avoiding my eyes. She led me away from the sparkling, bright center of the room, past the beautiful round tables with their velvet chairs, towards the dark back of the massive hall. We walked past the final row of guest tables, entering the narrow, dimly lit corridor that led to the service exit. And there it was. The wooden bar stool. The tiny high top. The little card reading, Sloane. +1. I am so incredibly sorry, Tamsin whispered, looking like she genuinely wanted the marble floor to crack open and swallow her whole. Fallon gave me the final chart yesterday afternoon. She specifically requested this exact placement. I tried to ask her about it, but she told me not to question her. Before I could even process the horrifying words coming out of Tamsin's mouth, a loud, booming burst of laughter echoed from the main dining room. I stepped out of the shadow of the gloomy corridor and looked toward the joyful sound. It came from table 4, the prime real estate table, right next to the dance floor. There, looking incredibly smug in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, was Declan, my ex-boyfriend. The man who had publicly humiliated me and cheated on me. He was sitting right next to one of Lachlan's loud groomsmen, clinking expensive crystal glasses and grinning from ear to ear. Declan was not a relative. He was not a childhood friend. He was just a pathetic guy who desperately liked to hang around people who looked wealthy. A smooth voice pulled me from my frozen state of shock. Hey, Sloane. Looking good tonight. It was Lachlan. He was walking toward the kitchen, holding a glass of expensive scotch. He paused when he saw me standing near the bathroom corridor. He glanced at the pitiful bar stool, then back to me, an arrogant, sickening smirk playing on his lips. Lachlan, I said, my voice eerily calm despite the absolute roaring in my ears. Why is Declan sitting at table 4? And why am I seated in the hallway next to a toilet? Lachlan sighed heavily, swirling the amber liquid in his glass like a movie villain. Look, Sloane. Do not make a huge scene, okay? Declan is a really good guy. He is helping me out with some major business connections in the city. He brings actual value to the table. We had to prioritize seating for people who, actually have influence in our social circle. You are just here by yourself. +1s do not need a fancy seat. It is just logistics, nothing personal. Influence. He actually used the word influence to my face. I looked at this man, this hollow shell of a human being whose entire lavish wedding was currently hanging by the very thin thread of my corporate signature, and I felt a profound, chilling clarity wash over my entire body. So, my seat is by the bathroom because I am single and completely lack influence? I asked softly, making sure I heard him correctly. Exactly, Lachlan said, entirely missing the immense danger in my tone. Glad you understand how things work. Just grab a cheap drink and chill out. The food tastes the same anyway, even if you eat it in the dark. He patted my shoulder, a condescending, dismissive, heavy tap, and confidently walked away to rejoin his wealthy, influential friends. I stood there in silence for a very long moment. I listened to the loud chatter of the guests enjoying themselves. I smelled the sharp bleach from the restroom mixing with the cooked fish from the kitchen. I looked down at the little place card. Sloane. +1. For 34 years, I had accepted their meager scraps. I had convinced myself that enduring their constant disrespect was the necessary price of admission to belong to this family. But Lachlan had just handed me the absolute truth on a silver platter. They did not love me. They did not even respect me as a human being. They only tolerated my existence when I was financially useful. And starting today, right this very second, I was no longer going to be useful. I did not cry a single tear. I did not scream. I did not throw a wild tantrum like Fallon would have done if the roles were reversed. I simply turned around and walked purposefully, with my head held extremely high, back toward the grand entrance foyer where the massive gift table was located. The gift table was piled dangerously high with beautifully wrapped giant boxes and elegant silk envelopes. I walked straight to the center of the display, reached out my hand, and picked up the thick, heavy, cream-colored envelope containing the $5,000 in crisp, untraceable cash. I held it firmly in my right hand, feeling the weight of my own hard work. As I turned to leave the foyer, I heard the heavy, frantic swish of expensive fabric. Fallon had just emerged from the bridal suite, flanked by her 6 identical bridesmaids, getting ready to make her grand, highly anticipated entrance into the cocktail hour. She froze completely when she saw me standing alone by the gift table, firmly holding my envelope. "Sloane, what exactly are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp, annoying, and echoing slightly in the quiet foyer. Several guests standing nearby turned their heads to look at us. I looked at my younger sister. I really, truly looked at her for the first time in my life. I saw the superficial beauty, the deep-seated, pathetic insecurity, and the endless, bottomless well of entitlement. "I am leaving your wedding, Fallon," I said, my voice carrying clearly and calmly across the space. Fallon's eyes immediately darted down to the thick envelope in my hand. Her face paled slightly under her heavy bridal makeup. "Why do you have your gift? Put that back right now. You cannot leave. The grand entrance is about to start in 2 minutes. Stop being so unbelievably dramatic." "Dramatic?" I echoed, stepping 1 pace closer to her. The bridesmaids nervously stepped back, sensing the shift in the air. "Lachlan just told me, to my face, that you seated me by the toilets because I am a single +1 with absolutely no influence. He also set my cheating ex-boyfriend at a VIP table in the center of the room." Fallon waved her hand dismissively, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, get over it, Sloane. We needed Declan there for important networking. It is just a stupid chair. Why do you always have to make every single thing about you? Just go sit down in the back, drink some wine, and put the money back in the box where it belongs." She reached out her hand, intending to violently snatch the envelope directly from my grip. I took a quick step back, gripping the paper tighter. "No," I said quietly. The single word hung heavily in the air, cold and terrifyingly final. Fallon stared at me, genuinely shocked that I had denied her something she wanted. "No? You wanted to treat me like a worthless +1, Fallon?" I locked eyes with her, letting all the accumulated ice in my veins show clearly in my gaze. I held up the envelope containing the $5,000 so she could see exactly what she was losing. +1 this. I turned my back on her stunned face and walked directly toward the massive, heavy oak doors of the venue. I did not rush. I walked slowly, deliberately, my heels clicking rhythmically and powerfully on the marble floor. "Sloane, stop right there." Fallon's voice pitched up into a hysterical, ugly screech. I heard the frantic, desperate rustle of her heavy silk gown as she tried to literally run after me. "You cannot do this to me. Put the money back. We need that cash." "Sloane." I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool, refreshing evening air. I heard her sobbing loudly behind me, screaming my name from the stone steps of the estate. Guests were murmuring loudly now, heads popping out of the doors to witness the unbelievable spectacle of the bride chasing a guest. I walked straight to my car, unlocked it, and slid comfortably into the driver's seat. I threw the envelope onto the passenger seat. I started the engine, put it in drive, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror a single time. As I drove down the long, winding gravel driveway of the estate, my phone began to vibrate violently in the cup holder. Call after call. Text after text. The family group chat was absolutely exploding. I let it ring. For the very first time in my 34 years of life, I felt truly light. I felt incredibly powerful. They thought I was just throwing a childish, petty tantrum over a seating chart. They thought they had won the ultimate victory by securing their perfect venue and their perfect caterer while putting me in my place. They had absolutely no idea that when I walked out those heavy oak doors, I took their entire financial safety net with me. I was the one holding the remote control to their entire fake, plastic reality. And I was about to press the power button. I did not go straight home immediately. I drove to a quiet, secluded overlook just outside the city limits. The night sky was completely clear, and the city lights twinkled beautifully below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. I parked the car, rolled down the window, and let the cool, crisp breeze hit my face, clearing the last remnants of the toxic wedding air from my lungs. My phone was still having a literal seizure. I finally picked it up and opened the unread messages. There were 22 missed calls from my mother, Veda. The text messages were a highly predictable barrage of extreme guilt trips and emotional manipulation. Veda, Sloan, where on earth are you? Fallon is crying her eyes out in the bathroom. You completely ruined her grand entrance. Veda, get back here right now. It is just a chair for crying out loud. How can you be so incredibly selfish on her special day? Veda, Lachlan says you took your gift. You know they are extremely tight on money. Bring it back this instant and apologize to your sister immediately. I scrolled through the messages, feeling nothing but a profound emptiness. Not a single message asked if I was okay. Not a single message acknowledged the extreme humiliation of seating me by the trash while my ex-boyfriend drank premium champagne. They only cared about the optics, the drama, and most importantly, the cash. I set the phone down on the dashboard. I took a very deep, long breath. The hot anger had completely burned away, leaving behind a cold, calculating, highly efficient professional. I was a director of risk management. My actual, paid job was to identify massive liabilities, mitigate financial losses, and execute brutal contract terminations when a business partnership was no longer viable. My family was a massive, toxic, unmanageable liability. It was time to terminate the contract once and for all. I opened the glove compartment, pulled out my work laptop, and quickly connected it to my phone's mobile hotspot. I logged into my highly secure corporate email portal. I navigated through the folders and found the specific file labeled Corliss Catering, Guarantee Agreement, Fallon Wedding. I did not just send a passive email. I picked up my phone and dialed Corliss's direct emergency line. Because it was the night of a major catered event, she answered on the second ring, sounding frantic. Sloan? Is everything okay? Corliss sounded breathless, likely actively overseeing the chaotic kitchen I had just escaped from. I did not see you in the main hall at all. Hi, Corliss, I said, my voice incredibly steady, polite, and deeply professional. I am no longer at the venue. I am calling to formally invoke the immediate cancellation clause on my corporate guarantor status for Fallon and Lachlan's account. There was a stunned, heavy silence on the other end of the line. The background noise of clinking metal pans and shouting chefs seemed to completely fade away. Sloan, what exactly are you saying? The event is happening right now as we speak. They are currently eating the appetizers. I am completely aware of that, I replied calmly, staring out at the city lights. However, the primary clients have engaged in behavior that breaches my personal and professional trust. I am withdrawing my financial backing immediately. Per our signed corporate agreement, I have the absolute legal right to revoke guarantor status at any point before the final invoice is settled if I suspect the client is insolvent or acting in severe bad faith. Corliss let out a low, long whistle. They really, truly pissed you off, didn't they? They seated me on a broken barstool by the restrooms, Corliss, while my ex-boyfriend sat at a VIP table in the center of the room. Corliss cursed loudly under her breath. That is absolutely despicable. Okay, Sloan. I hear you loud and clear. But you know exactly what this means, right? If you pull your guarantee right now, the penalty clauses in their contract activate automatically. Coincidentally, your sister changed the VIP menu to include fresh lobster and imported truffles just 3 days ago, and she promised the balance would be wired on Monday. Without your corporate backing, I require immediate payment in full tonight, plus the 25% late modification fee. That is entirely between you and your clients, Corliss. My company and I are officially and legally removed from the liability pool. Please send me the official confirmation of withdrawal via email immediately. You got it, Sloan. And for what it is worth, I am so incredibly sorry they treated you that way. You deserve so much better than them. I know, I said quietly, feeling the truth of those words settle into my bones. Have a good night, Corliss. I hung up the phone. A few minutes later, the email confirmation pinged loudly in my inbox. Guarantor status revoked. I leaned back in the driver's seat and looked at the thick envelope of cash resting peacefully on the passenger seat. Fallon had desperately needed this $5,000 to cover that exact menu upgrade she lied about. She thought she could treat me like absolute garbage and still collect her tax-free bailout at the end of the night. She thought my loyalty was a bottomless well she could drain forever. I started the car and headed home toward my quiet, peaceful apartment. The wedding was probably still going strong. The champagne was flowing, the music was loud, and Lachlan was probably still boasting about his fake influence. They had absolutely no idea that a massive financial time bomb had just been planted under their perfect evening, and the timer was ticking down fast. For the first 4 days after the wedding, my life was blissfully, beautifully quiet. I went to work, drank my expensive coffee, and enjoyed the profound silence of my apartment. I did not check my family group chat. I did not answer any calls from my mother. I just let the silence stretch out, knowing exactly what was brewing beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Fallon and Lachlan had flown out for their extravagant honeymoon in Santorini, Greece. I knew this because Fallon's social media was a relentless flood of curated perfection. There were photos of her in flowing white dresses standing against the iconic blue domes, videos of Lachlan sipping expensive wine on a private catamaran, and endless hashtags about being a blessed wife living her best life. They looked like royalty. They looked untouchable. But I knew the truth. I knew that the catering company's billing cycle operated on a strict net 3-day schedule for delinquent accounts. On the evening of their 4th day in Greece, my phone finally rang. It was not a text message. It was a direct, frantic phone call from Fallon. I let it ring 3 times before I calmly slid my finger across the screen to answer. Sloan, what did you do? Fallon did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. Her voice was shrill, echoing slightly, accompanied by the sound of wind and what sounded like Lachlan yelling in the background. Hello, Fallon, I said, leaning back in my office chair and looking out at the city skyline. How is Greece? Do not play games with me, she shrieked. I just got an email from Corliss and the venue owner, Alaric. They are threatening to sue us. They sent an invoice for $18,000. 18,000, Sloan. What the hell is going on? They said you pulled your corporate guarantee. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. That is correct. I revoked my financial backing the night of your wedding. I thought you would have received the automated notice by now, but I suppose the time difference delayed things. Are you insane? Fallon was hyperventilating now. You cannot do that. We do not have $18,000. You promised to handle this. You are supposed to be the guarantor. A guarantor is a safety net, I explained, using my most detached, professional voice. And you do not put your safety net on a broken stool next to the toilets. You made it very clear that I was just a single +1 with no influence. +1s do not sign corporate checks, Fallon. They just eat the food and leave. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Lachlan swearing violently in the background, demanding to know what I was saying. Sloan, please. Fallon's voice suddenly shifted from angry to desperate. The arrogant bridezilla was gone, replaced by the panicked little sister who always expected me to clean up her messes. Please, you have to call Corliss. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her you will reinstate the guarantee. We are literally on our honeymoon. This is ruining everything. Just pay the balance and we will pay you back, I swear. Pay me back. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. With what money, Fallon? You cannot even afford the deposit. In fact, let us talk about that deposit. You needed exactly $5,000 to cover the upgraded lobster and truffle menu you secretly added 3 days before the wedding, did you not? The silence on the phone grew thicker, heavier. You knew I was bringing a cash gift, I continued, my voice turning to ice. You were banking on my envelope to pay off Corliss before the penalty clauses kicked in. You thought you could treat me like human garbage in front of our entire family, humiliate me in front of my cheating ex-boyfriend, and still happily pocket my $5,000 to fund your fake lifestyle. It was Lachlan's idea to move your seat, she sobbed, throwing her new husband under the bus without a second of hesitation. He wanted Declan at the main table for a business deal. I told him it was a bad idea. It does not matter whose idea it was. You allowed it. You smiled at me and told me it was my place. I sat up straight, feeling the full weight of my own power. The $5,000 is back in my bank account. The guarantee is permanently revoked. You and Lachlan owe Corliss $18,000, payable immediately, or she will file a breach of contract lawsuit and send it to collections. Enjoy the rest of your honeymoon. I hung up the phone. I did not block her number. I wanted her to have the option to text me, knowing I would read her desperation and choose to do nothing. I had spent my entire life being the shock absorber for this family. It was time for them to feel the full impact of their own terrible choices. The $18,000 catering bill was just the first domino to fall. When you build a life entirely on lies, unpaid debts, and the exploitation of others, the collapse is never contained to just one area. It spreads rapidly, destroying everything in its path. The next morning, while I was reviewing a contract for work, my mother Veda called me. I ignored it. She called again. I ignored it. Then she sent a text message that was so frantic it was missing half the vowels. Veda, Sloan, you need to call the resort in Greece right now. They locked Fallon and Lachlan out of their villa. Their cards are declining. Fix this. I read the message and allowed myself a small, genuine smile. This was the second domino, and I had personally flicked it over just hours after leaving the wedding. You see, Fallon and Lachlan were staying at an ultra-exclusive luxury resort in Santorini. What my family conveniently forgot was that this specific hotel chain was a global partner with my corporate firm. Months ago, when Fallon was crying about honeymoon costs, I had quietly added her and Lachlan to my company's Friends and Family VIP registry. This gave them an automatic 60% discount on their villa, free room upgrades, and waived deposit requirements. It was a massive financial favor that they never even thanked me for. When I revoked the catering guarantee, I also logged into the employee portal and permanently deleted Lachlan and Fallon from my VIP registry. I flagged their account as no longer affiliated. Without my corporate discount shielding them, the resort's system automatically recalculated their stay at the standard, exorbitant market rate. And because they were no longer VIPs, the hotel demanded an immediate authorization hold for the full amount. According to the frantic voicemails Fallon left me later that afternoon, Lachlan had marched down to the front desk in his expensive resort wear, ready to yell at the manager for locking their electronic room keys. He confidently handed over his premium credit card. It was instantly declined. He tried a second card. Declined. They had maxed out every single line of credit they owned to pay for the wedding dress and the flights. The resort manager, holding a firm line, demanded an immediate payment of $4,000 just to cover the days they had already stayed, plus the mandatory taxes they had previously avoided. If they could not produce the $4,000, the hotel security would escort them off the property and retain their luggage as collateral. They were stranded in a foreign country, utterly broke, and facing imminent eviction. This is where the grand irony of Lachlan's obsession with influence came into play. With his cards declining and his new wife weeping in the hotel lobby, Lachlan did the only thing a desperate man could do. He reached out to his wealthy friends. He reached out to the very people he had prioritized over me at the wedding. He called Declan, my ex-boyfriend, the man who sat at table 4, drinking premium champagne while I sat by the trash. I found out about this glorious detail through a mutual friend in the tech industry who still talked to Declan. Apparently, Declan had promised Lachlan a massive, high-interest personal loan to help them buy a luxury car after the wedding, which was the entire reason Lachlan wanted to impress him. But Declan was a financial shark. He was ruthless, calculating, and entirely self-serving. When Lachlan called him from Greece, begging to borrow $4,000 just to get their luggage back, Declan immediately sensed a sinking ship. A man who cannot pay his hotel bill is a terrible investment. Declan did not just say no. He laughed, told Lachlan he was a fraud, and immediately blocked his number. The great influencer, the VIP guest who was so important that he deserved my seat, had abandoned them at the first sign of trouble. Fallon and Lachlan were entirely on their own. For 3 days, they lived an absolute nightmare. They had to abandon the luxury resort, leaving 2 of their expensive suitcases behind as collateral. They moved into a tiny, unair-conditioned hostel room miles away from the beach. They ate cheap street food and spent their days aggressively fighting with each other on the phone with their respective banks, begging for credit limit increases that never came. Their perfect Instagram feed went entirely silent. The illusion was dead. The reality of their choices had finally caught up to them, and it cost exactly $4,000 in standard room rates to break them. But the true public humiliation had not even begun. By the time Fallon and Lachlan returned from Greece, flying economy on a budget airline they had to beg Lachlan's parents to pay for, the tension in the family was thick enough to cut with a knife. They were drowning in over $22,000 of immediate debt between the caterer and the hotel disaster. But instead of showing humility, instead of apologizing for their horrific behavior, Fallon chose violence. She was a creature of social media, and she genuinely believed she could control the narrative if she just played the victim hard enough. On a Tuesday evening, she posted a massive, multi-slide rant on her Instagram and Facebook. She posted beautiful, highly edited photos of the wedding, specifically choosing pictures where she and Lachlan looked like royalty. She included a picture of the main tables, showing Declan and the other guests laughing. I was, of course, entirely cut out of every frame. Her caption was a masterpiece of toxic manipulation. It read, "Our wedding day was supposed to be the most magical day of our lives." And it was until a certain toxic family member decided to ruin it because of her own bitter jealousy. This person, who has always resented my happiness, threw a massive tantrum over a simple seating arrangement, stole our wedding gift, and intentionally sabotaged our vendor contracts while we were on our honeymoon. We are dealing with extreme financial abuse right now. It hurts to realize that the people who share your blood can be your biggest enemies. #Survivor, #Toxic Family, #Protect Your Peace. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. Extended family members, high school friends, and Lachlan's coworkers were leaving shocked reactions, sending prayers, and telling Fallon to stay strong. My Aunt Talia commented, "I always knew Sloane was cold, but this is pure evil." My cousin Yoris wrote, "Cutting her out was the best thing you could do, bro." My phone started buzzing with angry text messages from relatives demanding I explain myself. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a cup of tea, and watched the likes on her post climb. I felt a strange sense of calm. Fallon had just handed me the exact excuse I needed to burn the entire bridge down publicly. She wanted a social media war. She brought a butter knife to a gunfight with a risk manager. I opened my laptop. I did not write a long, emotional essay. I did not use hashtags about being a victim. I relied on hard, undeniable, devastating facts. The golden rule of contract law is documentation. And I had kept every single receipt. I created a public Facebook post and tagged Fallon, Lachlan, my mother Veda, and every single relative who had commented on her post. My caption was incredibly simple. I paid for your glamour. You gave me a chair by the trash. Contract terminated. Beneath that, I attached 4 images. Image 1. The official seating chart Tamsin the planner had accidentally CC'd me on a week before the wedding. I highlighted the notes Fallon had typed next to my name. It read, "Sloane, overflow section near the service doors. Keep her away from Lachlan's tech friends. She is too stiff and will kill the vibe. Make sure her card says +1 so she gets the point." Image 2. A time-stamped photo I took on my phone at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the wedding day. It showed me in sweatpants, drenched in sweat, carrying heavy boxes of their custom wine glasses into the venue while they were taking luxury photos in the garden. Image 3. A clear, unedited photo of the wobbly wooden barstool placed right next to the swinging kitchen door and the bathroom sign, with my elegant name card sitting on the tiny table. Image 4. The most devastating piece of evidence. A screenshot of the official corporate email confirming the revocation of my guarantor status. I highlighted the unpaid balance section, which clearly showed Fallon and Lachlan owed $18,000 because they secretly upgraded the menu without having a single dollar to pay for it. I hit publish. I did not have to say anything else. The evidence spoke so loudly it practically screamed. The narrative Fallon had spent hours crafting was shattered in less than 30 seconds. People cannot argue with a seating chart that explicitly outlines cruelty. They cannot argue with an unpaid invoice of $18,000. I sat back and watched the chaos unfold. The comments on my post exploded. Old high school friends, former coworkers, and even some of the wedding guests who had no idea what happened began chiming in. The tone shifted instantly from pity for Fallon to absolute disgust. But the most satisfying moment was watching my Aunt Talia, the same woman who had called me evil 10 minutes earlier, quietly delete her comment on Fallon's page. The flying monkeys were retreating. Fallon had tried to paint me as a jealous villain. Instead, I exposed her as a broke, cruel fraud who relied on the very sister she despised to fund her fake life. And as the post went viral within our social circle, it caught the attention of someone who held Lachlan's entire future in his hands. The fallout from my Facebook post was swift and brutal. The extended family, who had spent decades enabling Fallon's bad behavior by looking the other way, suddenly found themselves staring at undeniable proof of her cruelty. My cousin Yoris, who had publicly supported Lachlan, sent me a private message saying, "I had no idea about the seating chart. That is messed up. I am staying out of this." He then promptly unfriended Lachlan. The friends Lachlan had so desperately tried to impress at table 4 began distancing themselves, terrified that Lachlan would ask them for money to cover the massive catering debt. But the social humiliation was nothing compared to the professional disaster that was about to strike Lachlan. This is where the universe truly delivered justice in the most poetic way possible. Remember Alaric, the stern, wealthy owner of the historic estate where the wedding was held? The man who was currently owed a significant portion of that $18,000 bill? Alaric was a prominent figure in the city's business elite. He was a member of a highly exclusive country club. And his regular Sunday morning golf partner was none other than the chief executive officer of the tech firm where Lachlan worked. The tech industry in our city is a surprisingly small, gossipy circle. When an employee runs around acting like a high-rolling influencer while secretly defaulting on massive contracts, word travels fast. 2 days after my Facebook post detonated, Lachlan was called into a sudden, unannounced meeting with his director of sales and a representative from human resources. I learned the details of this meeting later from a contact I had inside his company. Apparently, the CEO had casually mentioned to Lachlan's director that one of their junior sales guys was bouncing checks and destroying relationships with premium vendors in the city. The CEO had specifically told the director, "If this kid cannot manage his own personal finances without committing fraud against his own family, I do not trust him to manage multi-million-dollar client accounts." Lachlan was brutally interrogated. He tried to brush it off as a simple family dispute, but the HR representative actually pulled up my public Facebook post. They showed him the unpaid catering invoice. They questioned his integrity, his judgment, and his overall character. He was not fired right away, but the damage was terminal. Lachlan was immediately stripped of his 2 most lucrative client accounts. He was placed on a strict probationary period, meaning his commission structure was slashed, and he was explicitly told that any further noise regarding unpaid bills or unethical behavior would result in immediate termination. The arrogant tech bro who thought I was not influential enough to sit at a real table had just lost his primary source of income because of his own greed. Back at their tiny, rented apartment, the stress of the collapsing reality finally broke them. The golden couple, whose entire relationship was built on taking perfect photos and spending other people's money, turned on each other with a viciousness that shocked even me. Fallon went on Instagram Live, tears streaming down her face, claiming that Lachlan had lied to her about his finances. She told her few remaining followers that she had no idea they were broke and blamed Lachlan for the seating chart entirely, insisting he forced her to write those cruel notes to impress his friends. Lachlan immediately retaliated on his own page, posting a furious text update calling Fallon a delusional gold digger who forced him into debt to buy a dress she could not afford. They were airing their dirty laundry for the entire world to see, tearing down the very image they had sacrificed my dignity to build. The flying monkeys were entirely silent. There was no one left to defend them. The truth was too ugly, and the financial hole was too deep. But the final, most devastating twist was yet to come, and it would involve the one person who had orchestrated this toxic dynamic from the very beginning, my mother. A week after the online explosion, my doorbell rang late in the evening. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother, Veda. She looked older, smaller, and entirely defeated. She was clutching a large purse to her chest, her eyes red from crying. I unlocked the door and opened it, leaving the security chain attached. "What do you want, Mom?" "Sloan, please let me in," she begged, her voice cracking. "I need to talk to you. Please, it is an emergency." Against my better judgment, I unhooked the chain and let her step into the foyer. She did not bother with pleasantries. She immediately broke down into heavy, gasping sobs. "You have to stop this, Sloan," she cried, grabbing my arm. I gently but firmly pulled my arm away. "Fallon and Lachlan are talking about getting a divorce. They are fighting constantly. The catering company sent an official notice of intent to sue. Lachlan's pay was cut. They are going to lose their apartment." "That sounds like a terrible situation for them to figure out," I said calmly. "It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you," Veda yelled, a flash of the old anger returning. "You caused this. If you had just sat in the chair and kept your mouth shut, none of this would be happening. You took the $5,000. Just give it back to them, Sloan. Sign the guarantee paper again. Save your sister." I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. I felt a profound sense of pity, not for her, but for the childhood version of me who spent decades trying to earn her love. "I am not giving them a single dime," I said firmly. "They dug this hole. They can climb out of it." Veda's face crumpled. She sank onto the small bench in my hallway, burying her face in her hands. And then, she said the words that severed our relationship forever. "I tried to fix it," she mumbled into her hands, her voice barely a whisper. "I tried to get a loan for them to pay Corliss. But my credit is terrible." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, crazy light. "I tried to use your information, Sloan. I know your social security number. I tried to apply for a personal loan in your name just to cover the catering bill. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I just needed to buy them some time." The air in the room turned to ice. My own mother had attempted to commit identity theft and financial fraud against me to save the golden child. The bank flagged it, Veda sobbed, oblivious to the sheer horror on my face. They asked security questions I did not know. The application was denied. "You have to help us, Sloan. I am begging you." "She is depressed. She cannot handle this." I stood perfectly still. The last lingering thread of obligation I felt toward this family snapped, ringing loud and clear in my mind. "Get out," I said quietly. "Sloan, please, get out of my house." I roared, the volume of my voice startling even me. "You tried to steal my identity? You tried to ruin my credit, my career, my life, to pay for a party? You are utterly sick." Veda scrambled to her feet, backing toward the door. "I am your mother. You are supposed to help family." "You are not my family," I said, opening the door wide and pointing toward the hallway. "You are parasites. If you ever try to use my name, my credit, or my social security number again, I will not call you. I will call the police, and I will press felony charges. Do you understand me?" She looked at me, truly seeing the cold, unbreakable wall I had finally built. She nodded silently, stepped out into the hall, and hurried away toward the elevator. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the security chain into place. And for the first time in 34 years, I breathed freely. The villains in my story were finally locked outside. 6 months have passed since the wedding disaster. My life has moved forward in ways I never thought possible when I was weighed down by my family. Without the constant financial drain of bailing Fallon out of emergencies, my savings account grew significantly. At work, my handling of high-pressure corporate contracts caught the attention of the executive board, and I was recently promoted to Senior VP of Risk Management. I bought myself a beautiful new car, took a solo trip to Italy, and finally started living for myself. The situation on the other side of the family tree is a stark contrast. Fallon and Lachlan are still legally married, though from what I hear through the grapevine, they are utterly miserable. The fairy tale is dead. They were forced to move out of their luxury downtown loft and relocate to a tiny, outdated apartment in a much cheaper suburb. Lachlan is still clinging to his job, working grueling hours just to scrape together his reduced commissions. They are currently on a strict, court-ordered payment plan to pay off the $22,000 they owe to Corliss Catering and the venue. Every month, a huge chunk of their income goes toward paying for a party they cannot even look back on with joy. Fallon had to delete her influencer social media accounts because the comment sections became too hostile. She recently took a job working the front desk at a dental clinic just to help make the minimum payments. My mother Veda lives with them now, helping pay the rent. I have not spoken to her since the night I threw her out of my apartment. I placed a permanent security freeze on my credit reports, ensuring she could never try to steal my identity again. Yesterday, I walked down to my mailbox and found a plain white envelope. The handwriting was messy, but I recognized it immediately. It was from Fallon. I took it upstairs, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened it. It was a single page, written on cheap notebook paper. Sloan, I am writing this on my lunch break. I hate my job. I hate my apartment. I hate what my life has become. I know you probably will not read this, but I needed to say it. You were right. About everything. Lachlan treats me like a burden now that we do not have money. Mom constantly complains about the tight space. I look back at the seating chart at the bathroom door, and I feel sick to my stomach. I was so jealous of your independence that I wanted to make you feel small. I thought if I put you in a corner, it would make me the center of the universe. Instead, I ruined my own life. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even expect you to reply. I just want you to know that I finally understand how much you carried for us, and I am truly sorry I broke the only safety net I ever had. Fallon. No demands for money. No excuses. Just the raw, miserable truth of a golden child who finally had to face the real world without a shield. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not text her back. I did not call her. The silence I maintain now is not out of bitterness or anger. It is born of absolute peace. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is not tearing someone down. It is simply stepping back and letting them survive the reality they built for themselves. I look at that drawer sometimes, wondering if the punishment fits the crime, or if the bonds of sisterhood should eventually count for something. And that brings me to you, the people who have listened to this entire nightmare unfold. Fallon's letter is still sitting in my drawer. Part of me feels heartbroken for my own sibling having to pay such a steep price, while the other part views my current peace as an invaluable treasure I wouldn't trade for anything. If you were in my shoes, would you ever open your heart to give Fallon a second chance? Or should that door remain closed forever? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for following along with this journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more crazy Reddit drama, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.